Welcome, folks. Happy Friday to everybody. Microphones are on. I believe the internet's working. Welcome. Thank you for joining me. Happy Juneteenth, to everybody. The kind of informal holiday here in the U.S. or celebration of the freedom of the slaves, which doesn't coincide with the Emancipation Proclamation from a couple of years before by Abraham Lincoln that actually freed the slaves, or the 13th Amendment, which actually was ratified like a year later. It's the time that basically Union soldiers showed up in Texas to tell all of the slave owners, too bad, you don't have slaves anymore. And to the slaves, you're free. So that's the celebration today. Later today, my wife and I and the baby are going out for a social distancing protest or demonstration, celebration of the day, however you want to call it. And I hope you guys are all celebrating it in your own special way. Daniel, good to have you. Milan, good to have you. Guys, we have some exciting exciting Paintover to look at, and I call it exciting because it's something that I see a lot in ArcViz, and I'm excited to talk about it. And then we're gonna try and we'll see how much time we have left. We might do some painting on that image my old image that I'm still not happy with. I still feel like I don't fully understand why I can't get it to work, and so we might play with that some more. But let's get started with the Paintover that is actually already done. And talk about a few things. I think this will be a good one. Okay, let's move some things back into place. Loving these, by the way. They're fantastic. On the old Cintiq here. But let's get ourselves organized and queued up and take a look at this. Okay. What do we need? We need that guy. Okay, so this is an image from Alexander Hubbard. We have kind of like an industrial building just after it rained. Kind of coincidentally, it's just after it rained, which I think is interesting. But that's not the aspect of this that we're going to be looking at. We're really talking about specifically. My overall feelings on this image is I love all of these very soft cool blues throughout the image. I think they match well with the greens in the image. And I like that the inside of the image has a kind of, I want to say sterile feeling, but sterile in a good way. Like when you go into a factory and everything's painted white and super clean, it feels really nice. I remember back when I was 18 or so, I was a mechanic for cars during my last year of high school and the year before I actually ended up going to college. I took a year off, and just we wore dark colors because we were covered in grease all the time. And down the street from the garage that I worked at was it wasn't a Porsche dealership. It was a Porsche service station. They specialized in old and racing Porsches, and the mechanics in there wore white coveralls, and everything was white and spotless, and it was always the coolest feeling in the world. And that's what I get from having this kind of very neutral, all white interior, which I really, really like. Nicholas, Nitkin, good to have you guys here as well. So I think Alexander's done a really good job with those things. And there's some really cool texturing going on here. This is a low-res image. It got sent through Facebook, so it's, I think, like a 2K image that then Facebook reprocessed. Why they have to reprocess every image that goes through even Messenger is beyond me. But I like these patches of concrete that we have throughout. Everything's doing really well. The first thing that jumped out at me though when I looked at it, as in the one thing that I would fix if I was in charge of this image, and so fix subjectively, what would I felt needed changing, or would want to change, is the balance of light between how bright the interior is and how bright the exterior is. And largely, basically, in my opinion, one of the two needs to get darker. So we have the interior completely blown out in spots, right? That's like going to like a full white all in there. And then we have a pretty bright exterior scene as well, right? Everything's kind of, living in, above 50% brightness. I wonder what the histogram looks like. There you go. Let's change that. Expanded view, luminosity. So the histogram doesn't look terrible, but the problem is that it's bright everywhere, in my opinion. And when you look, especially for this is a photorealistic rendering, let's look at some that's like very quickly pulled up like shots of similar types of settings. Can we all see this? Yes, we can. So I just Googled architectural design, industrial building photography. Wonderful Googling, Michael. If we look at this image here, right, this sky, overall, it's darker outside in this image, and we still are seeing a lot of reflection in the glass. The interior is not blown out. If we go to, like, dusk photography, and dusk is the only time, dusk or dawn, right, like right before the sun rises or after the sun sets, is really the only time that the ambient light outside is enough to see the outside of a building, but that it basically, as far as intensity goes, matches with the interior lighting, right? If the sun's up at all, interior lights are just orders of magnitude dimmer, and so they don't show up at all, right? Like if we look at photography, architectural photography that's taken in the daytime, the windows almost always will show up as dark. And that has nothing to do with whether or not there are lights on inside. It has to do with the nature of glass and the intensity of the sun versus the intensity of interior lights. So it's mindful of kind of keeping that relationship in mind, because it will always feel, if you have your interior lights so bright that they're competing with the sun, there's something's not going to feel realistic about that. Jafar, thank you. I appreciate it, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. Okay, wait. Back to what I was saying. So, like, even when you look at just like some city shots, right? The windows are the dark spots, and they almost always are, unless they're reflecting like the sun, and then you get a nice flare off of them. This is pretty universally true. If we look at dusk photography, you can see the interior in this image is not blown out. You can see how dark it is outside, right? So this is the kind of the later end of dusk. This would be like the earlier side of dusk. We're going to ignore the colors, I think, in this one. They're a little bit overdone to my liking, but still see how much reflection is on the glass, and the insides aren't blown out, right? They're nicely kind of balanced with the amount of light on the outside, but it's still pretty dark outside. Excuse me. And yeah, you can kind of look at any architectural photography and get that feeling of the relationship and how glass reacts in different times of day and different lighting situations. So what we see here is overall a pretty bright ambient scene. It's overcast, so we have a very soft light, which is nice, but the lights on these lampposts are having more of an effect on this side than the sky, which acts as a giant dome light, right? And so we have all of this brightness all throughout the scene, and then the inside, which is trying to be shown as illuminated, the only place to go is brighter, and at that point it's blown out. And so the two kind of options of the direction I think an image like this can go is you can go later in the day, turn down the intensity or change the HDRI that you're lighting the entire scene with, so that the scene gets darker and the lights stay more or less the same as far as intensity goes. Or we can bring back more reflection into the glass, or even if that wasn't glass there, even if that was completely empty, and we were just looking into the interior space, that would still be significantly darker, even with artificial lights on, than the outside where you have the sun in the sky and everything else. So if you want to keep the overall image at this kind of level of brightness, the inside would need to get darker, would be my kind of feelings on that. Let's get to the time lapse. So I painted on this for like, I think 24 minutes, 25 minutes, somewhere in that range, while talking to a friend last night. And so there might be some like weird pauses during it. I think I edited most of them out whilst I was recording it, but who knows? We'll find out together. And then you'll also see that I get pretty much I get 90% of the way there after like the first couple of minutes of painting, just by darkening the outside. So let's have a look. Okay. Screen sanity check. Yes, sir. Let's press play. Okay, so this is just kind of looking through what we got in here to play with. Clark, good to see you, my friend. Welcome. So we're just kind of checking some things out, and then the first thing we're doing is just using, I think that was like a self-illumination pass. I'm not sure what that, not self-illumination, lighting pass, something to grab the inside, and you can see even with that just quick curves adjustment to darken the outside, and this gets a little bit moody, I think, probably for a client's liking. I would probably not go with such a moody sky if this was for client work, but this is not adjusting anything in the image really besides like the light, right, to make it a bit more, at least to my liking or to my tastes, believable as far as the balance between exterior light and interior light. I'm looking at it now, it probably gets a little bit dark as well, but what can you do? 20 minutes is not going to fix everything. The other thing that you're going to see is that the bright greens, you don't get those bright greens very often, and almost the only time you do is when the sun is out. More often than not, they tend to fade into desaturated colors. So what else is there to say about that? I think I got most of my thoughts on balancing light of interiors and exteriors off my chest on that little rant of sorts. But it's one of those things that I think it's easy, and I think we see, one of the reasons I think we see it a lot in ArcViz is that in our clients' heads, we can picture or imagine a nice, bright, beautiful image where the lights are on and you can see inside the building too, and everything's happy and wonderful. And so clients think that it would look good, and then they ask for it, and then we start making these images because that's what our clients are asking for. And I think it's a fine line of how far you can kind of push the non-realistic, photorealistic part of what you're doing before it starts to be less engaging of an image. I think that the original image that Alexander had here, I think this would be a great shot to do a daytime image, right, with a bright sky and you can see reflections on the glass and everything else, and then an image that's further into dusk, maybe not quite as far as I take this image. I go pretty moody on it. Who knows? You guys can judge for yourself when we get finished here in a couple of minutes. But this, I think, would be like a great angle to show two shots for daytime, nighttime. There's quite a bit of banding that starts showing up. I fixed a little bit of it, but not well. Facebook's algorithms are aggressive, let's call them. Excuse me. Clark, it is, if I was making this image myself, I would probably try to get at least the rough part of this balance right in the render. Really everything I'm doing now, and kind of for this whole thing, not the whole thing, but most of it, you could just get done by changing down the HDRI environment or dome light strength, depending on what rendering engine you're using. And so it's literally just click, click, click until it feels right, and then you're done. And then adjusting your tone mapping, I would protect some of the highlights inside of the building here, so that we're not actually seeing things get, clamped down to white. But yeah, if I was working on this image, I probably would render it differently. If it was me, I wouldn't necessarily fix this in Photoshop. I try to get everything, especially for professional work. I try to get things in frame buffer, however you want to call it. I keep saying in camera, as close to right as possible. It's less work. You're less likely to do something that looks completely unbelievable, because obviously in Photoshop you can do whatever you want. And it makes things much smoother, especially if then there's changes. It doesn't take as long to make those changes typically, unless you have a giant Photoshop. Like changing this Photoshop file, because re-rendering it would be, basically starting over. But this sort of thing that we're doing here is a great way to kind of figure out what's wrong, or what needs to get changed, and do quick tests of what if we went this direction. We could also pretty quickly rough in what this would look like if we went the opposite direction, right? We could fake some reflections, darken down the windows, and see if we liked that really quickly. Whether or not it would be faster than doing it in 3D probably depends on how efficiently you work in 3D. But using all the tools at your disposal to keep things moving forward, I think, is an important part of CG. Clark, that is a great question. And to anyone listening, that's not reading the chat, Clark asks, how do you deal with the client who wants that overblown interior because they think it's cool? Generally speaking, so the overblown part, right? If you just change the clamping on it a little bit, it'll look better, and it'll still be just as bright. We'll have more detail in it. That's a relatively easy kind of sell, and I don't get people, I've never had clients ask for things to be blown out. I've had them, now, if what you're asking is, how do I deal with clients that want to see the image in daytime, lit up beautifully, and then also be able to see inside, so that let's turn off the transparent or the reflection of the glass, and let's make it look really clear, and then we'll turn up the lights. That kind of blown out, so not like a pixel value, but a lighting issue of blown out. That I get all of the time, and generally speaking, my reaction is one of two things. One is I try to understand what they're trying to show, and like I said, in an image like this, it might be easier. This is all rendered. There's no photo plates in this, and so my most likely approach would be just to render both of them and quickly Photoshop both of them and give them both, and say and just refuse basically to put it together. But hey, here's your daytime image, here's your nighttime image. Use them how you want. The other thing that I have done in the past is understanding that they want to be able, you can see inside of some glass during the day. So if that's really what they want to be able to see inside, and they want it to be daytime, there is a kind of happy place where you can still see inside and it's still bright outside. The inside's going to be much darker than it is here, but it'll still feel transparent. And my kind of goal then is just to do that so well that they're happy with it, right? They only tend to continue if it doesn't feel like it's a inviting, warm, bright space inside. Then I haven't done my job well enough, effectively. So it's either do it so well that they just love the image, or just do one image of each, I think would be my general way of getting it done. But they ask for it all the time. It's the same thing. They ask for a beautiful dusk living room from the inside, right? And dusk from the inside doesn't work the same way that dusk does from the outside. In the inside of a room at dusk, the windows are just, all you're gonna see is actual lights. You're not gonna see the effect of that light on any buildings. The glass is just gonna be a mirror. So it's always a bit of a tough balance with clients, but generally speaking, a question that I have also found to be very, very successful, especially if they continually are asking for one of these scenarios, and they're not listening to me when I tell them that I don't think that image exists, and I don't think it looks as good as you think it does, if I can't, you know, eloquently and politely explain it to them, I ask them to find me a photographic reference. You know, if you guys could find a reference to show me in a photograph the mood that you're after, that would be really helpful. And the 4 or 5 times I've asked a client for that specifically, they've said, well, we haven't been able to find one, but like, we think it's going to be great. And I said, listen, you know, guys, I'm happy to try it and I'll do my best at it, but there's a reason that you can't find any photographs of this thing, right? We talked about that a little bit earlier this week. The idea of like a beautifully lit dusk interior shot, let's say, they do exist. The interiors are super duper dark so that you're not getting a ton of reflection on the glass, or they're like bad HDR, and we're just going to ignore that altogether. But a lot of times if you ask them to find an actual photograph of what they're talking about, they can't find one, and that kind of drives the point home of the photo that you think that I'm trying to recreate doesn't really exist. It's just in your head. But that's delicate, because if you piss them off too much, then you're just in for a world of hurt. So, and I've done that a couple of times, as I'm sure is not a surprise to any of you. Nicholas, what's your thoughts on mixing 2D and 3D in ArcViz? Let's say this one only had the building rendered. Nicholas, I don't have any strong thoughts on like how much post should you do, how much 3D should you do. Is photo bashing good or bad? I'm all about the easiest way to get to the result that I'm looking for. Chop and I actually, in a couple of weeks ago, Chop and I did a wrong effing question about 2D post versus no post production. Kind of talking about this issue. And for me personally, it's all about whatever's easier. And so for most of my professional work, which is like luxury, high-end residential stuff, that's just kind of the niche that I find myself living in. I'm working in like a very photorealistic fashion, and photorealism is easier if a lot of it's done in 3D. Getting photographic elements to sit all together and feel photographic in the way that the ArcViz or the developer community sees photorealistic or views photorealistic is a lot of work, and then it's not changeable, right? And so I do most of my professional work very heavily in 3D with just a little bit of post done to each image. And the post part, even though it's the smallest part of the entire process, is to me the most important and my favorite part. If you're working on like competition imagery for an architect, if you're working on more painterly or looser styles, the balance of like the benefits of doing it all in 3D start going down. For me, like the image that we're just looking at here, this image I would rather render to get closer to 3D, closer to the final in the render, so that the Photoshop isn't as heavy if this was for a client. But there's a lot of clients that will be perfectly happy with how this ended up, even if I look at it and can pick out the things that I feel like should be a little bit cleaner. So I think it's really find something that works efficiently for you, for the style that you're trying to achieve. And efficiency is important. In the 10 years or so I've been in the ArcViz industry, projects continue to get shorter, the number of images required continue to go up. Being able to work quickly is incredibly important, and sometimes that means a lot of Photoshop, sometimes that means a lot of 3D. Depending on how you work with your clients and number of changes and all of that kind of thing, you might need to do everything in 3D just so you can change it enough, right? Changing things in Photoshop over and over and over again is quick, but it kind of deteriorates the image over time. So keep in mind efficiency. I think that that's an underrated part of any artist's workflow. But then whatever works best for you after that. Let's see here. Any other questions? Mike, can you please explain why you're blurring the image and playing with hue? What is that for? Yes, I can. Milan, I'm glad you checked that out. Clark, you as well. Thank you. Nicholas, it's very true. Photo bashing Interiors aren't very forgiving when it comes to perspective being off. And when you're photo bashing a lot of stuff together, little things just kind of start giving you a little bit of that Vincent van Gogh perspective problem, which you don't really find in exteriors. So you don't have it. They're much easier to kind of fix in exteriors. So yeah, I say whatever works as long as it looks cool in the end. Jafar, to answer your question, towards the end, there's some layers. This one, I think, is maybe one of the blurred layers you're talking about. Yeah, sure. So we'll just recreate that, and we'll kind of adjust it. So if we, there's a bunch of ways you can make a merged layer. You can do Control-Shift. Oh, wait, we're not looking at my screen. Haha. I actually kind of caught myself on that one. Yeah. 70 or so live streams in, and I'm starting to get smarter. So here's one of the layers that you were kind of talking about, turned up to 100%, and I don't remember where it was before. I was messing with it a second ago. Let's just recreate that. It's something that it's a way to kind of soften that kind of CG feel and to add like a little bit of glow. So making a merged, I usually use Control A and then Control Shift C and Control Shift V for paste merged. You can also use Control Shift Alt E. I just don't like that. It doesn't matter. Either way, get a merged layer up top. Set it to something like this is a screen layer, and you can see if we wanted to go like weird dreamy. Now, obviously, we're going to turn down this effect, but depending on what effect you're trying to do. If you're trying to do kind of like a soft haze, you can blur the hell out of it, right? And that's going to soften everything. And if you want just like a little bit of like light bleed or whatever else, you can kind of sit down there in like the 2 to 4 pixel range. Excuse me. So let's leave that at screen. Let's leave it at full opacity. Screen has a tendency to desaturate things and kind of wash things out. So a lot of times what I'll do if I'm using a screen layer is go ahead and put a hue saturation adjustment on it that just bumps up the saturation a bit, and then another one on top of that. And I don't always do these with adjustment layers. A lot of times I just actually use standard hue adjustments. But this is a glowing effect, right? And so we do want probably a little bit of warmth, right? I like that it's neutral, more or less on the inside, but didn't want to go fully white for whatever reason. And so this, we're just gonna set to kind of a yellow. And I kind of, obviously this is way overdone right now, but I kind of like the overall direction it's moving things. With the exception, let's throw a curves layer into the mix here. Let's clamp some of the blacks, right? Anything that's clamped down to black in the screen layer is not gonna have any effect on the image below, and we don't wanna see necessarily the blacks get lighter. Okay, and then we just go back down to the screen layer and we either decrease the opacity to, something at like between like 10 and 30%. Usually I feel like feels good, at least for me. And now you don't really see that layer, but if we flick it on and off, you can see what it's doing. Right? It's making everything a little bit softer, a little bit brighter. And I use like things like that all of the time. The other thing that I will sometimes also do is let's say I wanted to like really kind of crank up the glow in some of these places. Like maybe somewhere like there, I want that to kind of stick out a little bit more. And so maybe I want to like actually saturate that a decent amount. Again, this is overdone at 100%. But we can paint into a mask of this. Maybe we want just the exterior lights to kind of start picking up some of these hues and tones. We're going to adjust it now that it's just where it is. And now we can go and say I want it to be a little bit more on the yellow side and not that saturated. I like that. And then as opposed to adjusting the opacity of the curves layer altogether, or the screen layer, make a mask on it. And we can use levels to go to, like, you know, if that was somewhere around 30%, that's going to be somewhere around 75 on the black value scale. All right, so that's now adjusting everywhere at around 20%, 30% of the whole thing. And then because the layer is still at 100% opacity, if I want to go in and paint in just a little bit more of an effect in certain places, oops, wrong one, I can go in with a soft brush and just kind of start to paint it in just a little bit more in like certain spots that I want to have highlighted. Right? And so like that's the masks that I just painted. But the result is that you get a little bit more of the effect in certain spots, which, you know, that's kind of the idea. At the end of the day, that's not really, that one's cooler, that one brings a little bit more warmth into it. Which one's more valuable, who knows. But an easy way to kind of fake what light actually does in the real world. Okay. How long have we been going? 31 minutes. Did we try to do some painting today? Yeah, let's do a little painting. Why not? It's Friday. I'm hesitant, and I'm hesitant for the same reason that I didn't actually get to this painting before today's stream, which is I really just think that the problem we were talking about just a minute ago, which is you can't really find a photograph of the thing that of the mood or environment or settings that you're picturing, usually means that it's just not going to work. So I think that we have a high chance of failure in this little, the next 20 minutes, but we're going to go for it. In the meantime, however, one final thank you to Alexander for submitting an image and letting me work on it here. I hope you found something helpful in that. And I hope that it kind of shed some light on something. So that was the start of the image, and we went dark with it. And like I said before, oh, you know what we should do real quick? Before we go and scribble on the other thing, we have to pick. We can either go scribble, and let's not scribble. We have 25 minutes, and I know what's going to happen. I'm going to start painting on that guy, and what we're going to do is that my hunch, which is that the image that's in my head cannot exist in the real world, is not going to work. And then, so we're going to do 25 minutes, and it's just not going to look good. And then we're going to be like, yeah, you were right. You should have trusted your gut. I'm going to trust my gut. What I am going to do, for sometime next week, I'll do a paint over of that, not trying to achieve the look that's in my head, but trying to figure out what should that image have been. What would have been a good moody image for that? And that's something a little bit more thinking. Instead, for today, what we're going to do is we're going to quickly take this image from Alexander and quickly mock up what this would look like if we went the other direction, which is let's keep the outside brighter and figure out what would happen if we kind of tone down some of this brightness. Let me know if you guys are okay with that. That's my plan though. And now this is one, let's see if we have, we have a reflection pass. Well, look at happy day. Okay, let's find that, the glass. Do we have a clear side? That might do it. That might give it to us. Okay. I'm not sure which ones of those we need. Doop-a-doo. And those, I do not believe, are glass. They're not. Okay, so we have the glass more or less selected. Let's create an adjustment layer. Let's create a group. And let's find where that reflective pass was. Okay, so we're going to do a couple of things. One, to be clear, this is not something that I would ever try to fix in Photoshop for a client, but I would most definitely do little tests like this if I feel like I'm stuck, if I can't figure out what to do next. I frequently will just take whatever test render I have from the closest I can get in 3D and come into 2D and start pushing and pulling and moving things around. And it's not always just to like test the idea. What we're about to test here, I do think would be easier to test in 3D. But a lot of times your brain just kind of gets stuck in 3D, and coming over into 2D and starting to mess around with things generates ideas. Your brain kind of functions in a slightly different way. So it's worth considering. So let's start darkening this down. Now, one of the things that we're going to see is that when we darken this down, everything turns to gray because it's blown out and it's very, very neutral. So we're going to have to deal with that. And we're going to deal with that in a kind of brute force type of way. And all we're trying to do is get it to a point where it's not distracting. You guys have probably heard me say it a decent amount, here and there, whenever I'm working on things, is that if something's distracting you, it's going to continue to bring focus. And you might not be able to figure out what you're trying to fix if that's the case. Okay, so let's make this let's kind of start to make this into something right now. Obviously it's not going to be that bright, but it might in a couple of spots. Let's just kind of keep going. Now it's getting a little bit green, so we're going to fix that in a second too. Alright, so there's kind of sort of our glass reflection. I think we're turning the mullions bright too. Yeah, like I said, we're not going to be able to fix everything in this. But let's go ahead and take it. Move this down, and I'm going to group all of those together. I'm going to turn down this. That's kind of like simulating kind of sort of a like that industrial super duper opaque glass or super reflective glass. It looks kind of garbage, and I doubt that that's the glass that they're trying to do. So we're just going to turn that down somewhere in that kind of world. Right, so that we start to have a feeling that the glass is present to some degree. And then we are also going to go in and we are going to tone down all of these highlights. Right, and the reason that we're going to do this is, again, obviously this would be a super quick fix in 3D because you would get that for free, and that's not what I was hoping would happen, but you know, what are you gonna do? Is that compositionally those bright highlights would go away and they play a pretty big role inside of the image as far as how the composition's working. And so we're just gonna kind of uglily paint them away. Now, what reflections would actually end up getting brighter is these sky reflections over here. Now that we've gone to the sky, and we forgot to fix the green in this. Actually, probably no. Let's mask that guy. Not going to worry about that bright light outside just right now. We are going to make these windows not so green. And it looks like we got a little bit of red in there that I want to get rid of. Something like that. And maybe we're going to lift the blacks just a smidge in them. Yeah, not my best work. Okay, let's do a little painting on this guy. Not with the intention of painting over this entire image, but let's just kind of, all of this fall off light that we're getting from all these interior light sources, we wouldn't get, right? Like that. In the daytime, you're not going to ever see light bleeding out of a building. You would need those. Super big giant lights that Hollywood uses to fake the sun at nighttime. I don't know if you guys in New York, each now and again, you'll be walking through the city at night, and they'll be shooting something in the West Village, and you'll like turn the corner, and then that block will feel like it's noon. It's crazy. They have these giant light arrays that they put up on these giant boom stands, and there's 10, 15 feet across, and it's faking a sun. It's nuts. So that's kind of right. This little guy here is a bit of a telltale. We're getting a shadow from these lights, which again, daytime we just wouldn't get it. Okay, good enough to fix for now. So now let's just see what we would get. Did some quick editing. So we're gonna go ahead and darken the foreground just a bit, which is also going to make this green way more saturated to the point where we kind of lose that lovely combination. Greens. We kind of lose that like lovely relationship between the greens and the blues that Alexander had set up initially. That I think might be a little bit too much, but it kind of starts to set things together. And this, I didn't really talk about the composition of this image at all. However, I do think that having a little bit more space on the left, something like that, so that the main building is a little bit more centered in this image, might be nice. Did we not do content aware? Let's do content aware. Let's see how Photoshop does with this guy. You never really know, but it usually gets some work done for you. Not terrible. Could be much worse. That's just kind of Oops. That's just kind of nothing fancy. Let's just paint some of those things out and try to ignore the sloppiness on the left side. All right, zoom out so we can't see the sloppiness. I do think that helps the composition a little bit. It feels a little bit more balanced to me. I'm gonna have to figure out a solution for these streams in the summertime without. Here's a quick test, guys. Tell me how that air conditioner sounds. Is it making the audio super duper loud? I'm assuming that you guys can at least hear it, but is it distracting? Still seems to be pretty quiet. Let me know, because it's like, oh yeah, we're climbing up into the high 80s in here at the moment. Let me know. Maybe we just deal with a little bit of the occasional AC noise. Not distracting. Two not distractings. Maybe we'll have to occasionally just kind of toss that on just a bit. I still keep thinking that these windows need to, like, realistically need to get darker. What are we doing on time? 45 minutes. Not bad. Not bad. Well, yeah. Thank you, Milan. I'm actually curious. If I was rendering Clark, I wonder if my GPUs would be audible over top of the AC. It's possible that they would. They are loud. And then, minus the sound of the compressor, that's about what they sound like. So we're just kind of fixing. Obviously, these would be shadows if we had turned off or turned down the intensity of the outside lights. Whoa! No, thank you. Let's bring again, doing the same thing that we kind of like stepped through before. Let's add just a bit of warmth. I want it more in that like kind of nice yellow range. But not quite greenish, and then desaturated. Ooh. Let's tone that down just a. There are some blacks over there that we're getting just a mite bit, you know, distracting. Here we go. I mean, we're gonna probably stop it right about there. Like, I feel like you can at least look at this and start to get an idea of what we're seeing. And I do think that if we were gonna go daytime on these, I'm not sure what my solution would be for doing this one a day. I'd have to start thinking about that differently. Because this, I definitely find. Ooh, yeah, let's. I meant to do that, and I didn't. Let's go and let's give this one a content aware crop and see how this does. Now, I should have done this last time. For whatever reason, I do find I sometimes get better results. About the same. Sometimes I do get better results with like the content aware stuff when I take it out and put it into a completely separate file. But this one being a nice dark image, I feel like it is much more forgiving when it comes to this type of content aware stuff. Yeah, I do think I would move this a little bit this way, and I would maybe grab that guy. Let's put him up there. Maybe put another light over here, and maybe I would brighten those up. Okay, I think. Well, thank you, Javier. Yeah, we got a little white noise. We got me rambling on. We got some like lo-fi beats playing. All is well in the world. Where'd the beer go? All right. That's where we're gonna end today. So again, thank you to Alexander for submitting his image. I really like it. I had a lot of fun painting on this. I hope you all learned something from it. Thank you for being here and hanging out with me on Juneteenth. Happy Juneteenth again to everybody. And it's Friday. We'll be back on Monday with Patrick. Doing something, talking about something. We'll figure it out this weekend. Yeah, that's all I got for you guys. We will see you on Monday at 1. Thank you all again. Have a great weekend. Be kind to one another. Be well and happy rendering. And until that time, it's awkward time. Awkward time. Okay. Doot, doot, doot. Before you even get to the buttons. Guys, we will see you on Monday. Cheers. Beep. Boo.